Troy had grown up surrounded by people, yet felt utterly alone. The sterile walls of St. Joe's orphanage were filled with the hum of distant chatter, the shuffling of caretakers' feet, and the occasional cries of other children, but none of it ever reached his heart. He yearned for the warmth of a family, a father's reassuring voice, a mother's gentle embrace, siblings to share laughter and mischief with. Instead, his world was filled with routine and rules, void of the intimacy and security he craved. Christmas carol nights were one of the rare times the orphanage felt alive, the halls resonating with cheerful tunes and twinkling lights. But even then, the joy felt borrowed, a fragile illusion that faded as soon as the decorations came down. Troy would sit in the corner, pretending to sing along, while his heart ached for a celebration he could truly call his own. The arrival of gift people was a highlight for most children, but for Troy, it was a source of resentment. These well-meaning strangers arrived with shiny wrapped packages and strained smiles, patting him on the head as though he were a puppy in need of pity. Their visits, brief and superficial, only emphasized how he was viewed, not as a person, but as a charity project, a box to check off on their list of good deeds. The toys they brought, while appreciated by others, felt hollow to Troy, a poor substitute for the affection he longed for. It was in books that Troy found solace. The orphanage's modest library, often overlooked by the other children, became his sanctuary. He immersed himself in tales of daring adventurers, brilliant inventors, and visionary leaders. Each story was an escape, transporting him to faraway lands where anything seemed possible. One book, in particular, captured his imagination, a biography of a self-taught inventor who rose from obscurity to change the world. Troy read it cover to cover, the words sparking a quiet rebellion within him. If someone else could defy the odds and carve out a path to greatness, why couldn't he? That night, staring out of the window at the distant city lights, Troy made a silent promise to himself. He would not let his circumstances define him. He would forge his own destiny, not as an object of pity, but as someone who could make a difference. The seed of determination had been planted, and though he was still just a lonely boy in an orphanage, the spark of hope flickered in his heart, a flicker that would one day grow into a blazing fire. As Troy grew older, his determination to rise above his circumstances solidified into action. School became his sanctuary, a place where his efforts could lead to something more than just survival. While others in the orphanage went through the motions of attending classes, Troy pushed himself, excelling in every subject he could. He found particular joy in mathematics and logic puzzles, but it wasn't until he encountered his first computer during a school field trip that his life truly changed. The computer lab was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Rows of sleek machines hummed quietly, their screens glowing with infinite potential. Watching a programmer demonstrate how simple lines of code could bring instructions to life fascinated him. It was as if someone had handed him a new language, one that promised the power to create, solve, and innovate. Back at St. Joe's, however, computers were a distant dream. The orphanage barely had the budget for basic school supplies, let alone technology. But Troy wasn't deterred. Determined to learn, he sought out old computer manuals at the public library, borrowing them in secret and studying their contents late into the night. One evening, while rummaging through a donation bin at a nearby thrift store, Troy struck gold, a battered, outdated computer that didn't work. To anyone else, it was junk, but to Troy, it was a treasure. Using spare parts scavenged from the neighborhood junkyard and an old screwdriver borrowed from the orphanage's maintenance closet, he painstakingly pieced the machine back together. When it finally powered on, Troy felt a thrill like nothing he'd ever experienced. That makeshift computer became his window to the wider world. Through trial and error, he taught himself to code, starting with simple programs and gradually advancing to more complex tasks. The process wasn't easy. There were countless nights of frustration, debugging errors he couldn't yet understand, but each small victory fueled his resolve. The more Troy learned, the clearer his vision became. He didn't just want to escape the limitations of his life. He wanted to create something meaningful. He dreamed of building tools that could empower others, especially those who, like him, were eager to learn but lacked the resources. By the time Troy turned 18, his skills in coding had grown remarkable. Teachers took notice of his talent, recommending him for scholarships and internships. With each opportunity, Troy felt the gap between his past and future narrowing. The boy who had once been defined by loneliness and pity was steadily forging a path of his own, one built on resilience, hard work, and a relentless desire to prove that his circumstances would never define him. By his early 20s, Troy had transformed his determination into tangible success. After earning a full scholarship to a top university, he dove headfirst into his studies, focusing on computer science and entrepreneurship. His passion for coding grew alongside a burning desire to make a meaningful impact. While others dreamed of climbing corporate ladders, Troy dreamed of building something that could change lives, especially for people like himself, who started with nothing. During his final year of college, Troy began work on a project that would later define his legacy. Inspired by his struggles to access resources while growing up at St. Joe's Orphanage, he envisioned a platform that could provide free, interactive education to anyone with an internet connection. The platform, which he named Testimony, was his answer to the barriers he had faced, a way to ensure that no child, regardless of their circumstances, would be left without the tools to learn and grow. Testimony started as a humble idea, coded in late-night sessions in a cramped dorm room. Troy worked tirelessly, leveraging every ounce of knowledge he had gained over the years. He sought out mentors, pitched his vision to investors, and rallied a small team of like-minded individuals who shared his passion. The early days were tough. Funding was scarce, and skepticism ran high. Many questioned how a free education platform could sustain itself financially. But Troy's resolve never wavered. Drawing on his own experiences, he created a system that combined accessible learning with innovative sponsorships and partnerships, allowing companies to support the platform while reaching students worldwide. The breakthrough came when Testimony's beta version went live. Within weeks, the platform gained traction, its user base growing exponentially. Students from underprivileged communities across the globe were logging in, discovering courses in coding, engineering, mathematics, and more. For many, Testimony was their first step toward a brighter future. Troy's efforts didn't go unnoticed. He was soon invited to present Testimony at a prestigious technology conference, where his powerful story and groundbreaking platform captivated the audience. The applause that followed was thunderous, but for Troy, the real victory lay in the faces of the young learners who sent him messages of gratitude, children whose lives were being transformed because of his work. By the time Troy was 25, Testimony had become a household name in the tech world. Investors flocked to support the platform, and Troy's team grew into a dedicated group of educators, developers, and advocates. Awards and accolades followed, including the coveted Best Technology Startup Award. Yet, despite the accolades, Troy remained grounded, driven not by fame or fortune but by his commitment to empowering others. Troy's success was no longer just his own. It was a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt invisible, a reminder that even the most challenging beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes. He had risen above his circumstances, not only achieving his dreams, but creating a path for others to follow. With Testimony thriving and millions of users benefiting from its resources, Troy felt a familiar tug in his heart, a longing to return to where it all began. St. Joe's Orphanage, once the source of his deepest loneliness, was now the center of his attention. He wanted to give back to the place that had shaped him, even in its harshest moments. Troy returned to St. Joe's on a crisp autumn morning, his heart pounding as he stepped through the gates. The orphanage hadn't changed much, the same weathered brick walls, the same creaky playground swings. But Troy wasn't the same boy who had once stared out those windows, dreaming of a different life. He came back not as the orphan boy struggling for a chance, but as a man determined to open doors for others. Accompanied by his team, Troy presented a plan to transform the orphanage into a hub of opportunity. His vision was bold, a dedicated learning center equipped with state-of-the-art technology, where the children of St. Joe's could explore their talents and interests just as he had. The Learning Center wasn't just about computers. It included mentorship programs, coding workshops, and partnerships with local businesses to provide internships and job opportunities for the kids as they aged out of the system. Troy wanted to ensure that no child left the orphanage feeling unprepared or unsupported. The grand opening of the Learning Center was a celebration like no other. Children and staff gathered in awe as Troy unveiled the bright, welcoming space filled with computers, books, and interactive tools. For the first time, the orphanage resonated with laughter and excitement, not the forced cheer of holiday visits, but genuine hope and possibility. As Troy watched the children exploring their new world, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. He recognized their wide-eyed wonder because it mirrored his own when he'd first discovered coding. He saw in them the same spark of potential that had driven him, and he knew that this was his true legacy, not the awards or accolades, but the lives he could change. Over the years, Troy continued to expand Testimony's reach, creating similar learning centers in underserved communities worldwide. His efforts inspired countless others to give back, sparking a global movement of education and empowerment. Yet, Troy never forgot his roots. He remained a regular visitor at St. Joe's, mentoring the children personally and sharing his story to remind them that their circumstances didn't define their future. One sunny afternoon, as Troy sat under the oak tree in the orphanage's courtyard, a young boy approached him, clutching a notebook filled with scribbled ideas for an invention. "Mr. Troy," the boy said shyly, "do you think I can be like you some days?" Troy smiled, his heart swelling with pride and emotion. "You can be better than me," he replied, his voice steady and full of conviction. "You just need to believe it and never give up." In that moment, Troy realized the full circle of his journey. The boy who had once felt invisible had become a symbol of hope and resilience. Through his work and his unwavering belief in the power of dreams, Troy had built not just a company, but a community. One where no child was left behind and every story had the chance to become a testimony of triumph.